are coming to you from the Robertson Center, excited to share a little bit about how we can walk away with kind of practical tips to make reading more joyful in our lives. I'm so excited to be joined by the people you see on the screen today. I had the pleasure of working with all of these ladies, but meeting Susannah a couple of months ago and had a credible conversation. I should give some background. I am the mom of 3 kids, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old. You probably know this if you've been to our events before. I was a former first grade teacher, longtime educator. I thought I knew everything I need to do about reading. And I will say that when I first met Susannah, the first thing I told her is that I am not doing a good job as a parent of 3 readers. And Susannah changed the way I thought about that, gave me some really practical tips. And in the time that has passed, I would argue that my reading is not where it needs to be perfectly, but it is way better. It is way more joyful. And more importantly, I feel much better about what I'm doing. And so I hope that the same will be true for you. When you walk away today, we hope that you just feel a little bit more excited, a little bit easier, a little bit more lighthearted about this work of creating joyful reading environments. So that's why we're here today. The purpose of reading is to get kids to fall in love with literature, and Susannah and Maria are here today to help us figure out how to do that. So obviously we designed this event for families because families have a really important role here. Susannah's going to talk all about that in a minute, but I know that you came here today because you recognize that this is a part of your job. As a family, you prioritize this, and I just want to thank you for being here. So if you haven't already introduced yourself in the chat, we encourage you to use that chat. The chat is there. You can tell us your favorite books. You can tell us your kids' favorite books. You can tell us your kids' favorite names. Not their favorite names, their actual names. Hopefully their favorite as well. But if you have any questions that you want answered that you came here specifically for today, you got to let us know that. So make sure you put those questions in the Q&A, and also feel free to use the chat to engage. We'll be kind of engaging with that and using that, but we want to make sure that you get everything that you came here for today. And the best way to do that is by speaking up through that chat or through that Q&A button. So as I mentioned before, we have on the screen myself, Stacey Gershkovich, we have Susannah Richards, we have Maria Giraldo, and Maria Trivedi. 3 of us are here as parents, and Susannah Richards is here as a literary expert whose job it is to, she's also a professor and has lots of other great things that she does. But one of the things that we brought her here today is because she helps parents create joyful literacy environments for their kids. And I'm really excited to turn it over right now to Susannah to tell us a little bit more.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, and thank you, Stacey, for inviting me. I think Stacey was doing a better job with her literacy development in her family than she thinks she was. I just gave it a little bit of tweaking. I often use that term, paying respect to Tom Hanks in You've Got Mail, a book about a story and a movie about a little bookshop and literacy love that I actually got to do a little bit of work on a million years ago. So I'm kind of excited to be here. So as Stacey said, I'm a professor of literacy and literature at Eastern Connecticut State University. You can follow me on Twitter at Sussing Out Books. To suss is to bring something out in the open. You can also, if you're really bored, follow me on Instagram at Sussing Out Books, where sometimes you get my gardening, my sewing, and my cooking and my travels, in addition to a little bit of book love. But I'm so excited to be here on today, Langston Hughes' birthday, which is a big deal for a lot of reasons. And for me, it's a really big deal because I'm a reader in part because of Langston Hughes. When I was a little girl, my great-great aunt Amy was one of my favorite people in the entire world. And she was actually Langston Hughes' benefactress. She helped him and paid for him to go to the university. And he, one of his books is dedicated to her and her husband, and many books were inscribed to her. And she was just this amazing spirit, and she would read anything and everything, even though she lived at the beginning of the 20th century and books were not available on the internet and other things. I'm not even sure what Amy would say when she thought about people reading books on the internet, but I'm really excited to be here. And not only is today Langston Hughes's birthday, it's of course the first day of Black History Month, which is great. And not that we should only celebrate and affirm Black joy during Black History Month, because we should do it all the time. And I'm super excited about the books that are out there and available to do that. But here's a secret you might not know as parents. A lot of teachers know this, but tomorrow is World Read Aloud Day. What does that mean? That means in classrooms all across the country, authors and sometimes people like me who just love books are going to be virtualing, or if possible going in person, to read aloud books. And they're going to be so excited that kids are going to get to hear these books in different voices, and it's going to be happening. So you can follow this. It's World Read Aloud Day. You don't have to sign up to participate. You know how you can participate as a family is you can find a book to read aloud tomorrow. Maybe it's while your family is doing the dishes or eating a meal, or maybe you're getting ready for breakfast, but start your day with a great read aloud. I have so many read alouds sitting here, and there's no way I would be able to read all of them for you. But some of the read alouds are a little bit longer, and some of them are picture books, and some of them are literally books about food. Kim Nakayama, A Chef's Tale in 13 Bites, because sometimes I find that when you combine read alouds and foods, it's a really, really good thing. Oh, wait, Let Me Fix You a Plate, A Tale of Two Kitchens by Elizabeth Lilly. These are books that came out last year. So sometimes the read aloud can be a read aloud that you might start and you might not actually finish because a child might choose to pick it up. Here is The Curse of the Mummy, Uncovering Tutankhamun's Tomb by Candace Fleming. She has a new book coming out on Leopold and Loeb and how they tried to literally steal and manipulate and other things. So I'm super, super excited about that. And I am delighted to be here because there's so many different things that we can do to ignite, delight, and cultivate literacy. And one of the great things that we can do is take advantage of what's out there and the kinds of books that are out there and share them. So I am going to tell you a little bit about this book. I do have a little bit of a confession, and that is it's not going to be available in the United States until June of 2022. It was originally published in Europe, and it's being imported, and it will be available from a small publisher in Brooklyn called Enchanted Lion. It's called Telling Stories Wrong. It is written by Gianna Rodari, and it is illustrated by Beatrice Alamania, and it is beautifully illustrated. But this is the kind of story that I think every family might read over and over again. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to show you a little bit of it. Okay, and here we have the red end pages, and here we have the copyright page. Once upon a time, there was a girl who was called Little Yellow Riding Hood. No, red. Oh, right, Little Red Riding Hood. Her mother called her one day and said, "Listen, Little Green Riding Hood." No, red. My gosh, I think this reading might get a little bit exasperating. Oh, right, red. Her mother said, "Now go to Aunt Hildegard's house and take her this potato peel." What do you think is going to happen now? No, it's go to your grandmother's house and bring her this warm loaf of bread. This might not be your Little Red Riding Hood that you're familiar with. This is what we call a transactional dialogic read, because the truth of the matter is that once you start reading and the listeners in your life start picking up on the pattern, they're probably going to engage and start to correct all the things. I will tell you, it does have a happy ending, but it may not be the ending that you expect. It's Telling Stories Wrong, and it is going to be available in the United States in June 2022. That's a really kind of cool part about my life. I get a lot of books before they even get published, but there's so many ways that we can be excited about books. And did you know that 8 days ago, earlier this, later in January, but 8 days ago, on January 24th, something very special happened. It was what the American Library Association calls the YMAs, the Youth Media Awards. And on January 24th, they announced the Caldecott Award winner for 2022, and it went to Watercress, written by Andrea Wang and illustrated by Jason Chin. This is an amazing family story about watercress, believe it or not, watercress and the role that watercress can play in a family. I love this book so much, and I am so delighted for Jason Chin, who previously won a Caldecott honor for his Grand Canyon book. If you have any desires to travel virtually to the Grand Canyon, because we can't always travel in person these days, I highly recommend Jason Chin's Grand Canyon book. It's a sophisticated picture book with both a story and a lot of history about the Grand Canyon. But I was so incredibly delighted that this particular book won the Caldecott. We also had the announcement of the 100th Newbery. This year is the 100th anniversary of the Newbery Award winner, and it went to The Last Conquista, a book that is written by Barba Higuera and published by Levine Querido. And of course, with my life, I literally just had that book in my hands, and this moment I can't even find it because there's so many stacks of books. But if you just Google Newbery 2022, you're going to see this amazing book available. In addition to those awards, you might not know that there are other awards. Oh, here, look, my luck has had it. Here it is. Here is the Newbery Award-winning book, the 100th Newbery Award-winning book. And we're so delighted and excited. This is Donna's second book. I loved her first book. Lupe Wong Won't Dance, and I'm so delighted. This book smells so good, and it has a soft touch feel, and it has a little gloss and embossing on it. And one of the things, besides the story, I really just like the way this book is printed, which is, one of the kinds of things that I'm often very excited about, is how a book is printed and other things like that. But in addition, as I said, to the Caldecott and the Newbery, we also had the Coretta Scott King Award winners, and Unspeakable, the Tulsa Race Massacre, written by Carol Boston Weatherford, I am tired, and illustrated by the late and great Floyd Cooper, took a lot of awards. Anytime you pick up a copy of this book now, it's going to have so many stickers on it from awards. We also saw Yuji Morales win for her brilliant picture book, Bright Star, that was simultaneously published in Spanish, Lucero. We saw Tracy Sorrell take American Indian and Native Indian awards for best books with Classified. So we have lots of different books that won great awards. And you can find a complete list just by Googling ALA YMA 2022, and you're going to be able to find a list. And if you go to ilovelibraries.org, you'll be able to find a list of some of the great books there. Parents often ask me, and guardians often ask me, what is the best way for me to help create an environment where my child or the children that I love and care about might become readers? I'll tell you something. It's not a big secret. The lots of things that you can do, but one of the great things that you can do is have lots of books available. You can have books from the library. You can have books that you may be able to purchase. You can have old books and new books and true books and how-to books. It doesn't matter what kind of a book you have available. If you have a child who really likes the Great British Bake Off or the kids' baking shows, maybe you want a maker comic, Bake Like a Pro. Yes, there's a graphic novel about baking, and it's literally one of the maker comics, and there's one on gardening and how to fix a car and costume making. But I have to admit that I'm a little bit partial to Bake Like a Pro, a graphic novel about baking with ideas and information about baking and measurement and all kinds of things like that. So by having lots of books around, you literally are inviting kids into them. You can have books in the car, you can have books in baskets. You can have books near where kids might eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner. You should have books everywhere there might be a moment. Books in the bathroom. Maybe you want those to be in Ziploc baggies that you reuse and other things like that. But the truth of the matter is there's so many different places that you can have and take advantage of books and other things. And I think I'm actually going to show, let's see if this is going to work. We're going to do a little share screening here. We didn't practice this before, but we're gonna do a little share screening, and let's see if it'll work. And if not, we'll do something else. I did make some slides today, but sometimes they're not exactly what it is that I want when I decide that I'm ready to speak. But we're going to see if we can get this going right now. And so we'll talk a little bit about, there we go. There's so many different books out there. I don't know if you've seen any of these. These are mostly recently published books. They're books about Rita Moreno, or books about like animal friendships where there might be a little bit of controversy, or one of my favorite books by Sarah Albee, which is Fairy Tale Science, which is actually the science behind fairy tales. And it has real science experiments you can do. We also have beautiful books like Born on the Water, part of the 1619 Project, and Kate DiCamillo's new absolutely amazing book about learning to read, and a goat and a little bit of magical life in Beatrice's Prophecy, written by Kate DiCamillo, who you may remember won a Newbery Award for Flora and Ulysses, and she's won other Newbery Awards and honors, and it's illustrated by Caldecott Award-winning Sophie Blackall. I have to confess that I love everything that Sophie touches in every way, shape, or form. Not that I don't love a lot of the other books that I'm talking about, but about a year ago, she came out with this book, If You Come to Earth, and it is about like, what would you share and what would you like want to tell someone if you were telling them about Earth? There's so many different things in this large picture book that explores what people eat, how they live, where they go to school, and all the different things. Even the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden, makes an appearance in this book. It's so super cool, as well as beekeepers and cab drivers and other things like that. So there are just so many different books. I was lucky enough to be on the 2013 Newbery Award-winning committee, where we picked the one and only Ivan as the Newbery Award-winning book of the year almost 9 years ago. Catherine Applegate's newest book is Willowdene. It's a story about animals and relationships and predator-prey relationships. It's a story about the environment and going green. There's so many things in this absolutely fabulous middle grade chapter book. I know that
sorry to interrupt. It sounds like you have a million book recommendations, and I love every single one of them. I think it's okay with you if we share out these slideshows.
Absolutely.
So we can have this whole list for them. Do you mind taking it down? And I would love to, I hear you. Do you mind stop sharing for a second?
No, I don't mind.
Thank you.
Yes.
I heard you talk about, and this is very similar to the conversation we had, you spoke about the best way to develop this love of reading at home is to have books available to kids everywhere. And for me, that was, seemingly obvious. I don't think this is, as you said, it's not that complicated. But for me, that was really life-changing, right? I used to have books in bookshelves in my kids' rooms next to their bed. And now I have books where they put their shoes on so they could take them out. And as you were talking, I wonder, should I have books on my kitchen table? Because
or in a basket in the kitchen, or not necessarily on the counter, but very accessible, or in a place when kids are going out the door. It really just depends on what your environment is and what you can tolerate. And also, you really only need 3 to 5 books in different places, or sometimes even one. One of the things I think we often don't think about is the fact that a book can be dipped into. And by that, I mean, you don't always have to read it cover to cover. And I was thinking about some of the different books that I love that kids love that don't necessarily have to be read cover to cover. And sometimes they're list books or encyclopedic books. That we don't necessarily have to read cover to cover. And they're books that have a lot of things. I know that is, we're going in it's Year of the Tiger and other things. And this book is really good for improving your posture. Okay. And it's called Tiger, Tiger, Burning Bright, an animal poem for each day of the year. This is a perfect example. It is also published by Noisy Crow. Noisy Crow. This is a perfect example of a book where you might have it and somebody might dip into it a little bit here, a little bit there. And then after a while, they might not be as interested in it. But what is so incredibly important, and as a professor of literacy as well as literature, I know that the words that kids hear are super important. And it is so important to have a wide variety of books available so that different vocabulary comes into your worlds. And if we want to make sure that kids have the skills, the evidence-based skills that they need, that he, she, or they need to be a successful reader, we want to make sure that he, she, or they moves through the stages of phonological awareness and understanding the sounds that letters make, and they move through and they have a concept and knowledge about the alphabetic principle, which is how letters work and they come together to make different sounds. We also want to make sure that they're fluent with accuracy, rate, and prosody, just as a fancy word for expression. And then we want them to have all kinds of great vocabulary. And ultimately, of course, the objective is for them to comprehend, to literally make connections and create meaning with what they're reading. And books are such a great way to stimulate that. And they're so incredibly important for doing that. And the truth of the matter is a wide variety of books by a wide variety of authors that affirm a wide variety of identities and interests is a great way to make sure you're exploring it. So here's a book that a lot of parents don't often think about. And because they're like, who would want to read a book of lists? Well, this is Listified. It is published in collaboration with the Encyclopedia Britannica, which you might not know. Encyclopedia Britannica is putting out a new group of children's books, and they're absolutely amazing. And this is a book where I possibly argue there's something for everyone. There's something for a 70-year-old grandparent. There's something for a 52-year-old parent. There is something for an 18-year-old. There's something for a 7-year-old. And there's something that might be very interesting to a 5-year-old as well. Stacey, you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, all of this is so great. And I see coming in the chat, Miss Hall is talking about keeping books in your pocketbook. I think that's a great idea too, right? And I love your thought that it doesn't have to be 10 books, right? It could be 2 or 3 or 1 book even. What you just said reminded me, you said a lot of different books about a lot of different topics is I think what you said, maybe a little bit differently. But it brings me to a question that sounded very similar. Belinda was talking about, or not Belinda, it was kind of going back, David C was talking about graphic novels. And it reminded me of the conversation that I had about my son, and reminded me of a conversation I believe Maria Giraldo also had. So I want to transition, Susannah, to talk to these parents that we have here. So we have 2 parents joining us that have different kids at different age levels. And Susannah did a conversation like this with me, not planned, but I do think it was a really useful conversation. And my hope is that by doing this conversation, everyone who's listening in is going to hear something that sounds familiar to a kid in their home. And as I mentioned before, I walked away with great ideas. I mentioned graphic novels, right? My kid, my 2nd grader who was remote learning last year, read this and the series. There's 6 of them, I think 1,000 times. And I think that's the only thing he read. And Susannah, you told me not to worry about that too much. And can you talk to Maria Giraldo a little bit? Because she's in a similar position, and I tried to pass on your knowledge, but I think you do a better job of itself. So do you want to ask her a little bit about her child?
All right, I'd love to do that, Maria. I'm so delighted you could be with us today. And my understanding is that you have a child who loves graphic novels. Can you tell us a little bit about that child?
No, what the thing was that was Maria Trivedi that so it was the wrong Maria. Mine does not like the novels, and I'm dying for him to love them.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the graphic novel for anybody, either of the Marias or anyone who's on here. First place, I just want to literally tell you that if a child is reading graphic novels or wants to read graphic novels, the answer should always be yes. Do you know that graphic novels can have as much as 60% wider and wider vocabulary than regular novels and prose? So the answer to the graphic novel is always yes. There is nothing, absolutely no reason that a child should not read text that is presented as a combination of images and literally words. So images and words together are on fire in a really, really good way. It's good that I say that because I actually have a graphic novel called Flamer, which was one of Mike Giraldo's memoir, young adult graphic novel from a couple of years ago. This was published in September of 2020, which I can hardly believe was a couple of years ago right now. But this is an amazing coming of age novel, like finding out and exploring who you are. One of the things about graphic novels that's so incredibly amazing is that graphic novels are a format, not a genre. And what I mean by that is they're a form of delivering ideas. And so they come in all kinds of different flavors. They come in fiction and nonfiction. They come about serious topics, like we've seen in the news a lot about Art Spiegelman's Mouse graphic novel, A Survivor's Tale, and other things like that. But they also can be about memoirs. So for those of you who may be lucky enough to have access to Apple TV, you may have noticed that recently El Defo, the Newbery Honor-winning novel by C.C. Bell, which is her story of what it was like to have hearing support in schools. She lost her hearing as a young child, lost most of it, and she had a phonic ear, and what it was like to have an alter personality in schools. But one of the things that we can do in this day and age is also use media to help kids get into literacy. So we can take advantage of media presentations to get into literacy. We can also hook kids up with things they're interested in. So if your child is interested in car mechanics or animals, one of the things that I always recommend is that there is a publisher whose name is First Second, F-I-R-S-T, Second, S-E-C-O-N-D, and they have a little logo that looks like this on the side of the spine. I don't know if you ever go shopping in the library or in the bookstores by spines, but I do. And anytime I see a spine that says First Second, I look to see if there's a book that someone in my life might be interested in. They have graphic novels on the Constitution. They have graphic novels on whales and spiders and plagues and dogs and the polar bear one is just to die for. The one about trees is pretty good too. They have a whole series of science comics that are absolutely amazing. And so one of the things, Maria, is for a child who, thank you, hold that up, Stephanie. One of the things for a child who may not be that motivated to read is, one, don't give up, and B, try not to be too pushy. You may have to work on some kind of a negotiation, which is that I know you don't like to read, and I get that, but the truth is sometimes you're going to have to read. So here are 3 books, and if you need to spend 15 minutes a day reading one of these 3 books, and then we'll build, and if you really don't like it after 3 days, then you may choose another book. The truth of the matter is there's 7,200 books published every year. And so I haven't read all of those. No, I don't know a single human being in the entire world who's read exactly the same books as another human being. And therefore, it is possible that you can have a happy and successful life if you do not necessarily read all the same books. But having books available, also sneaking books in. So one of the things that you can do, Maria, is you can say, before we start dinner tonight, I thought I'd read a chapter of this book. I saw this book at the library and I thought you might like it. You might not, but I'm going to read a chapter of it out loud. And that's what we're going to do as our appetizer. So there are lots of different ways that you can ignite delight and cultivate literacy. I want all of you to know as parents that literacy development is often asynchronous. And what I mean by that is it doesn't happen at the same rate for all children. And even if you have an older child who is a voracious reader, you might have a younger child or a middle child, or even the twin, an identical twin child of one is a reader and one is a non-reader. During my history as a professor, I had that perfect experiment. I had a set of identical twins, and one was a reader and one was not. And it was my idea of a researcher's dream. I'm not sure it was the boys' idea of a researcher's dream, but it was mine because I got to do different things with them. So there also, I think something that a lot of parents and guardians don't realize is there are graphic novels for every age reader. Toon Books, TOON Books, has graphic novels for a 2 and 3 year old. Random House Graphics has graphic novels for older kids. First Second has graphic novels for adults. DC Comics has graphic novels for adults. So there literally are graphic novels, which are more complex than comic books, for every age range on every topic, whether it's a really serious topic like the Holocaust, or whether it's just a fun topic, just a fun topic that has a lot of joy in it. There are graphic novels on friendship.
Susanna, I'm just gonna, sorry, I just want to interrupt you a little bit because I realized we haven't actually let the two parents that are joining the screen introduce themselves. So I know you know a little bit about their children, but I would love for the audience to hear a little bit about their children, again, with the goal of seeing if maybe you have a similar child at home that you can identify with, so that Susanna's tips that go for these kids will translate to yours too. As Susanna mentioned, it's not that complicated. And so we believe that all of these tips should really translate nicely to your home community. So Maria Trivedi, do you want to introduce yourself first? And then Maria Giraldo, you go next.
Sure, thanks, Stacey. So I have a 5th grade daughter, Serena, and I have a 3rd grade son, Nikhil. So my son is absolutely obsessed with graphic novels, and he has been pretty much since 1st grade. And we went through the same situation during the pandemic where he insisted on reading the same ones over and over and over, and I questioned it and tried to pull him away. I'm glad I didn't, now that I know this. And one of the things, just a tip that we actually have been doing now, he's reading the same Dogman books that he first read at 6, now at 8, but listening to them as well. So he's listening to the audiobook. We borrow them from the library through Libby or Overdrive or any of those. And then he's following along in the book. And it creates a whole new meaning hearing someone else read them. And so it's just a little tip as Susanna was talking that I was thinking of. And my daughter loves, realistic fiction, nonfiction, historical fiction. She just loves reading, but was a little bit later in reading. And it's just interesting to see them completely different.
I think that's not unusual for readers in a family to be very different. And I just want to put in a plug. The answer to audiobooks, always yes. Audiobooks are not cheating. Audiobooks are absolutely a great way to develop vocabulary, understanding, comprehension, story development, and love reading.
Yeah, and that reminds me of another thing that Susanna mentioned to me, other audio, so podcasts. There's other ways to consume literature, or I guess maybe it's not technically literature, but content, right? And so podcasts are also great, and there's lots of great different ways, particularly maybe for someone who's more reluctant to read, as a way to get them excited about a topic, and then maybe you introduce a book on that same topic, was a tip that Susanna gave me. Maria and I were also talking, and I'd love Susanna for you to weigh in here. Maria, you mentioned that your son read Dogman when he was younger and now is reading it older. And you were telling me, and maybe you can just repeat for the crowd, how the experience you think is beneficial, right? Because he's understanding it on a different level now.
Yeah, so I think when I remember talking to him early on, and we weren't quite sure if he was actually reading or not reading or just looking at the pictures, but we just let it go. But now he's you hear him laughing, you can hear him absorbing and really becoming like one with the book. Whereas we didn't really know what was happening because he's not a big talker about books unless he's really interested in them. So I could tell that his understanding completely advanced over the course of reading it. I think he's probably gone through the series 3 times now in the course of 3 years.
I think that's really, really important. And one thing a lot of people don't understand is we auditorily process roughly 2 years above what we can read to ourselves. So when he was reading those books at 6, he probably got a certain percentage out of them, but he didn't get 99% out of them. So to listen to them again, because it was also his choice, right? So he was motivated to listen to again. He probably increased his literacy. I'd say my gut is plus or minus 20 or more percent, which is quite significant at that level. So if he came in at the 60% mark and he moved 80% or even higher, Maria, that's a really good thing. And I think what's really interesting here is that this is his choice. And that is one of the key elements I want parents and guardians to think about. The choice matters. If I were to tell you that you had to read a 1,300-page book in the next week about a part of history or something that you had no background or interested in, you might not be happy with me. And so this whole idea of choice is really good. But as I was listening to Maria, I was thinking about all the other graphic novels that he might be interested in, like those of Ben Hockey, or maybe the Great Gods by George O'Connor. But the truth of the matter is you can use that format as a hook. And George O'Connor loves Dave Pilkey. And so I sometimes do this thing, what I call the Friends of Authors series. So, oh, you like that and you read that a lot, but did you know that he or she is friends with so-and-so and they like their books too? Maybe you better check them out because, you like them so much, maybe you like their friends' taste, so you can really play with that. But I would really I would pull out the first, second list. I'd also look at a list by Harper Alley. That's the HarperCollins imprint. It's called Harper Alley, and it is a new graphic novel line that launched just last year. But I think you're going to find some titles that might be successful.
Great. And Maria Giraldo, can you introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about your kiddos?
Yeah, sure. Yes, so my name is Maria Giraldo. I have 2 children. One is turning 7 next week, so he's in 1st grade. He learned to read thanks to Command. So he does these little books, he repeats, he write them, reads them out loud, and does it several times. So he now reads. So he's in a very good reading level. But I think because of it, it got to a point where he's like, again, I have to read this again. I already know this again. So he generally speaking likes things that are related to space and cars. And if I was to give him, all right, now you have money, let's go and buy something, and it's only a book that he could buy, it would be something related to Lego. So like Ninja Legos or things that I don't find them like, okay, this is not, you're not going to learn much from it, but sure. And so those are the ones that he will be excited to read and look at many times versus like, I don't know, one of the books that is being talked to today that for him would be like, my mom picked this for me and wants me to read it. And sure, I read it. I also blame it at the fact that my husband and I were not good readers either. We don't often read. So we've implemented like, okay, no matter what, 15 minutes a day, we're just going to all of us sit and read. And so that's helped a little bit and try to get in that routine. Then I have 18-month child who is right now in the stage where he's just flipping books and imitating sounds, and he's very clear as to the books he likes and the ones he's not interested. So definitely loves these Goodnight Moon books. He could look at it all day 100 times as possible, and he would imitate the cow, and he would like look at the socks and point at his feet and things of that nature. But right now our struggling kid is the 1st grader who were like, please just let's love reading.
I mean, there's a lot of things to unpack in what both of you said, but the truth of the matter is there are lots of things that you can try. And first thing I want to just remind everybody that it's in certain people at certain times under certain circumstances. So I might recommend something that might work for one of you, but it might not work for somebody else. So a couple of good things, Maria. One, the number of picture book space books for your 7-year-old is humongous. And whether it's books by Dean Roberts or John Rocco or one of my favorites by my friend and Caldecott Award-winning Brian Floca, Moonshot. There are really great space books. They're very accessible with fabulous vocabulary. And in the anniversary copy of Moonshot, the most recent copy that was available, Brian Floca actually updated so much of it to be actual, like the actual serial number on items and other things. This is one of my books. This was published in 2020. It was one of my favorite books of the year. It might be a little bit harder for your 7-year-old right now, but it would be a book that you and or other adults in his life could use with him. This is called How We Got to the Moon, the People, the Technology, and Daring Feats of Science Behind Humanity's Greatest Adventure. It's written and illustrated by John Rocco. Most of you may not know John Rocco's name, but John Rocco is the person who did all the covers of the original Percy Jackson books. So he's a Rick Riordan illustrator. And John Rocco was obsessed, is obsessed with space. And so you can dip in and out of this book with the diagrams and the illustrations, and somebody might ask for help with some of the words, but there are tons and tons of space books. So I just want you to rock with that, literally, rock to the moon with it. Mars books, space books, there are space board books, there's space, literally everything. And it doesn't have to be a book as thick as this. It can be a book much thinner than this. It can be, the average picture book is 32 pages, 40 pages, 48 pages or whatever. So that's great. As for your younger son, I'm just going to say Goodnight Moon is great. There are parodies of Goodnight Moon. Because of what you said about the moo thing, I want you to, next time you go to the library or other things, look for other books with moo sounds like click, clack, moo books, cows that type. You might want to look at some of the Doreen Cronin books that have really good animal sounds. You might also want to expand it into farm animals and other things like that. That's really good for your child's auditory processing, and they're really good for storytelling. So that is super, super good. So the truth is, but I want to go back to the other Maria's daughter, the older daughter, because one of the things that you said is that she likes all kinds of fiction. So I wonder if she would be interested in like the books by Elena K. Arnold, or Leslie Connor, or Kate Messner, but I want to give you some authors who are also publishing new books across all different kinds of genres, both in the contemporary and the historical fiction series, but there's so many good things. She might be interested in the books by John David Anderson. There's just so many different books. I have to say the middle grade novel, for at least part of the year, is my sweet spot, where I'm buried under middle grade novels and I'm reading them. You also might some of you might be interested in, you've had kids who did the same thing with Rick Riordan's books, the Percy Jackson books, as what Stacey's son did with Dogman, or Maria's son with Dogman, also reading over and over again. And you want to expand, you want to move beyond Percy Jackson. You might also have seen that Disney Plus just announced that there's going to be a Percy Jackson series. But what you might not know is that Rick Riordan is editing a series of books with mythology from other places. So it's Hindu mythology, Cuban mythology, Mexican American mythology, Aztec mythology. They're all different kinds of mythologies, and these are part of the Rick Riordan books present. And I have to say, whether it's Sal and Gabby Save the Universe or Paua and the Soul Stealer by Lori M. Leal, I find that kids binge read these all the time.
Susannah, I love what you're saying here, and you obviously know these books and you can do this. It's incredible to watch. Like, I'm sure everyone who's watching this is like, how does this woman have these right at her fingertips, but then also actually have them at her fingertips? Like, it's really phenomenal. So I'm imagining someone like myself, I know some books. In fact, I am embarrassed to admit that a lot of the times the books that I bring for my kids are books that I remember when I was young, but they're not these new books, and there's so many great new books. So when I go to the library, what do I say to the librarian? Like, I try to get help from them, but I don't know what I'm supposed to say or how I give them enough information. Like, what do you need to know? What should a librarian need when we walk in there so that we get these right amazing recommendations that we're all getting today?
I think that's a really great question. And a lot of people don't take advantage of their librarians. We are go librarian. We love children's librarians, whether they're at the New York Public Library or the Darien Public Library, the Boston Public Library. So there are a couple of things I want you to know. First, not just as a result of COVID and other things, but you can access many library catalogs for public libraries all over the world to check them out before you go to the library to see what's available and what are highlights or stars of other things. But a couple of things that you can arm yourself with to help with them. First, introduce your child to the librarian and ask your child to, often the librarian will instinctually ask your child to share what he, she, or they has read recently and what they want to read and what they're looking for. Titles, the more a librarian knows, the more he, she, or they is going to be able to help make recommendations and other things. Also, many public librarians and public library systems have lists of books, and they're what I call the if you like, read alike system. So if you like this book, you might like this book. So if you like fast action adventures, you might like Jason Reynolds and Rollo III's new Stunt Boy, which is a new graphic novel that the great National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, Jason Reynolds, wrote. If you like books with trains in them, you might like this book. So know what your interests are, know what your child may need to read for an assignment or other things like that with some variables, know what your child is like. And it's also helpful to share things that were not successful with your child. Now, remember, the fact that we don't read a book at a certain point in our life can be a result of variables. So you might put a book on a child's radar now that he, she, or they might go back to in a couple of years because they're just not ready for it. Which reminds me, here's what I know about the research. If a child is reading something that he, she, or they is not ready for, they do one of three things. They put it down, whoop-de-doo, there are 7,100 other books from this year alone. So that means over the last 10 years, there are over 75,000 books. 2, they talk to somebody about it. Oh, great, they get background and other things. Or 3, if there's a mushy part with kissing or something else that they don't like, they skip that part. Oh, well, I've been known to skip parts of books and I was still able to brush my teeth and get dressed for today's session today. So I think it's still possible that we can do all of those things. So I
just want to point that out because I think that's a really, at least for me, and I don't know if anyone else agrees, but really freeing to recognize, like, I think somehow in my life I was told somewhere, trained in order, like I must finish a book. And I love hearing this, and like even the fact that some books are meant to be like more cookbooks, right? That you can read a page, you don't have to read it from front to back. In fact, they're not even intended to be used that way. But I think our kids also need to be explicitly told that that's okay too. And I think that goes to Maria Giraldo's son about like, it's okay if you don't like a book, then pick a different one. You have to read a book, but like, you could say, this is not one I want to read ever again.
I mean, have any of you ever gotten up in the morning and you started to put on clothing, a piece of clothing, and you're like, this is not working for me? It's exactly the same kind of thing. And the truth of the matter is, whether we read the canonical text, and luckily we're breaking open the canon and we're expanding the canon so that it has a wide variety of diverse and contemporary voices, and it's not just made up of dead white men that hailed from another continent. But the truth of the matter is that there's so many different things, and it is okay to dip. In an average week, I'm not kidding, I probably don't finish 20 to 30 books. I do finish another, you don't even want to know how many, but I look at them, I'm maybe looking at them for a particular criteria. Maybe I think I might want to use them in a workshop, and I'm like, no, this isn't going to work. And I'm also listening to books and podcasts and Story Seed podcasts and Kids Ask Author, Grace Lynn's amazing podcast where kids ask authors questions and other things like that. So yes, we have the right not to fail. Daniel Pennick years ago in French wrote something called The Rights of the Reader. And in it, he said, you have the right to dip in. You have the right to not finish a book. You have the right to not talk about a book if you don't want to. You have the right, this is my favorite one, to have a textually transmitted disease. And so where you're just so excited about it that you want to share it and other things like that. And I think that's really, really important. And I think it's great for us to develop some resilience and be able to do the things we need to do. But every book you pick up, you don't have to finish.
So
Stacey, I'm glad you said that, because it never hit me, but I do that all the time. And I actually just thought about myself. And last year I started using Goodreads for my own books. And I actually have an abandoned category that I created for myself. So I'm allowed to stop books, but I don't let my son. And now it's like, okay, got to reprioritize here. So thank
It's
you for
totally
saying
okay to abandon it. And abandoning it doesn't mean you may come back to it or whatever. I have 3 books by the side of my bed. I've lived in my house for 20 years, little over 20 years this month. And I have 3 books that have been by the side of my bed, not my like active side, my other side. And I abandoned all 3 of them at one point. But I think I might go back to different parts of them at something else. They also are the perfect size to hold up other books. So that is part of why they were there. But I love that idea that it's with this book for this person under those circumstances is that moment. And, you just don't know what that might be. I'm a huge fan of Franny Billingsley. Many of you are probably not familiar with her work, but I think she is the most amazing writer. And when The Robbers Girl was just being published, I started it, but I was too buried with work and other things. And so I put it away. And then on a snowy day in December, when I had a window and I thought I could sneak, I just picked it up and I cruised through it. It was just sort of on my radar, but I was also giving myself the ability that I might never have gone back to it, even though I love Franny Billingsley.
Susannah, we've got a lot of questions coming in from the chat, and obviously a lot of parents whose kid is not loving reading. One specific parent is asking about reading aloud versus child's reading. What's your theory there?
Okay, well, there's a lot of theory and there's a lot of research. Let me talk to you. First, they're both good. Absolutely. If you have children who are 37 who still let you read aloud to them, go for it. If you have children who are 7 and want to read themselves, go for it. The truth of the matter is that reading aloud and reading independently are both great things, and we don't all necessarily follow the same trajectory. So it is okay. So think about reading as what I call the chair and a half moment. It's that moment where it's also about that connection we have, feeling loved and comforted and other things. So if you have somebody who is willing and wants to read Einstein, The Fantastical Journey of a Mouse Through Space and Time, written by Torben Kuckelman and published by North South with you, great, do that. And if you have another person who wants to read Jackie Woodson's The Year We Learned to Fly, illustrated by Rafael Lopez by themselves, that's okay too. The truth of the matter is it's about finding your reading flow, like what works for you, and it might change over time. I have children who have books under their pillows and actually can sleep without getting kinks in their bodies with books under their pillows because they're waiting for the day that they'll wake up and be able to read those books. I have other kids who rearrange the books on their bookshelves. By the way, it's a really great idea to rearrange the books in your child's life periodically and go through them and say, are these books you want to keep around? Are you done with these books right now? Should we put them into book storage temporarily, or may we pass them on to somebody who might not have access to this book at this time, so she or they can have access? So rearranging your bookshelves, thinking about that. The read aloud is good. There's nothing wrong with the read aloud. And a read aloud permits you to put vocabulary on a child's radar, because if we hear a word first, we're more likely to comprehend it when we first see it in print. And so read alouds are great. So find a balance. Read aloud at an unusual moment. Read aloud with a flashlight. If you have one of those big flashlights, focus in and read at night. I'll never forget the first time when I was teaching 3rd grade and the kids came in for recess and I was sitting on the floor with a flashlight reading a book. I didn't even have to say anything to them. They all just sat down and listened to this book, which was Alvin Schwartz's Scary Stories. So the lights were out and I was reading in the dark with a flashlight. But if you have a child who likes to read at night, book lights are great presents. There are so many different cheap, super cheap book lights. Obviously, you want something that won't cause harm in any way, shape, or form. But the truth of the matter is, the answer to should I read aloud or should they read independently does not have an answer, because they are both good. They are both good, and they will both help ignite delight and cultivate literacy.
Great. So we only have 5 minutes left and this time has flown. I want to make sure that we answer any last questions that either Maria has. And Susannah, I also want to give you a minute to just give us some last words of wisdom. But I first want to thank you all for being here, you ladies on the screen, but also all of you who joined us at the end of a very busy day. As I mentioned, Susannah threw out a million book names. We are going to get as many as that we can and put them together in a list for you and send it out to make sure you have access to those. So if you weren't able to jot one down, be patient with us. We will make sure we get as many of them to you as we can. And if there's one that you missed that we can't get to you, send us an email and we'll figure out a way to figure out what that was. But before I say goodbye to everyone, Maria's, any last questions from either of you that you want to make sure to get answered?
Yeah, I guess from my side, like I was hearing this, like, you know, is it, do I read? Does a child read? Like, I think for my child, he would put all the books for me to read. And I am like very like elaborate and I make it, you know, like super exaggerated. And I think he enjoys that part. But now I want him to read, right? I want him to speak. He's bilingual, so I want to make sure he's pronouncing and he's doing things right. And so he's like, Mom, I'm reading in my mind. But I'm like questioning whether he's actually reading or just passing the pages, and be like, I don't think you're reading. I think you're just passing the pages. And like,
Okay.
how do I, you know, how do we get that? Like, is he really reading his mind?
It's a complicated question. One of the things that you can do is you can share that reading experience saying, I'm really happy to read to you, but I'm only going to read the odd pages, or I'm going to read every other page spread. A page spread is the left, the verso, and the recto. I'm going to read a page spread, and then you can read a page spread. Or if you're really generous, I'm going to read 2 page spreads and then you can read a page spread, and you can like do something like that and other stuff. Don't assume that he's not reading until you have the evidence, because you're making that assumption puts a lot of pressure and other things like that. So ask him, like you can ask questions without the book in front. Say, I just realized I noticed something on that page. Did you notice something on that page? What did you notice? And ask him about those kinds of things. And also periodically just say, you know, I'm really tired and I would love to sit and read with you, but I'm too tired to read. So I think tonight you're going to have to do the reading for me. So a little bit of parent manipulation goes a long way. And you just want to, like, you want to balance it, not do the same thing all the time. You can also think about the fact that you can have some kind of an interaction. You can, if you read a little bit of this book, I think we could probably read and stay up for 15 minutes later than we normally stay up tonight. And so that's a win-win. Yes, it is a form of bribery. I'm totally aware of that. But it is a really good win-win. And then eventually it's like, oh, I don't have time. I know we stopped on chapter 5. I've got stuff to do for work tomorrow, and I don't have time to read chapter 6 tonight. So if you want to know what happens, why don't you read and maybe you'll summarize it for me. Maybe you'll summarize it for me. So there are some things you can do. I know we're like quickly moving, but here's what I want to tell all of you. Don't worry. Spend your energy being strategic. And Valentine's Day is coming up, and I know it's a complicated Hallmark holiday and whatever, but think about giving a book with a bookmark in it and write your message of love on that. I like to say, read your heart out. And so my teacher candidates and the teachers I'm working with, and I'm going to be going into schools all week that week, doing different kinds of read alouds and sharing books. They're not all going to be sappy. They're not all going to be read. They're just going to be just fun books. But I love, like, what's your family thing? One thing I said to Stacey that I just want to get in there, and I don't know if I can quickly, Stacey, I'm going to quickly do a share screen and see if I can pull this. Let's see if I can pull this up for a second. But one of the things I said is, like, what are the literacy moments in your life? So like here, catch a child reading, literally catch a child reading. I don't know why this isn't working. Oh, I know why. So catch a child reading. Here's one of my favorite, slow people. Look, one of my students took this picture, literally had taken that picture of her horseback riding, reading a book and jumping over a fence. And another student with hockey. I'm telling you, I'm going to use this hockey player reading a Jennifer Nielsen book to motivate other readers. So take some literacy love here. This is one of my favorite families, and every member of the family reads to this young boy. This is another one of my favorite families, and these are just recent pictures that I asked their mom if she had any pictures of the boys reading. I love the fact that they're often like cheat reading over each other's shoulders or reading in the subway station. You can see reading in the car, like reading wherever they have a moment. This is like what we love. We love this kind of, we love this literacy love, and it can never start too young. And it can also happen late in life. The oldest person we know of to learn to read was 116. She's called The Oldest Student, and there's a beautiful picture book about her, illustrated by Oge Mora and published by Random House. That's about the oldest person to learn to read. I hope that all of your children learn to read before 116, just in case. I don't want you to give up.
After today, I think we have a better chance. So I hope everyone is feeling a little bit lighter, a little bit more kind of confident that they're doing really good things, and a little bit less pressure on us, right? Read a half a book, stop, read the comic, read Dogman again. I think seems like it's all going to be okay.
Yep. Listen to books. The answer is always yes. Pay attention to kids' interests. Oh, and last but not least, if your kids want pancakes, leave the pancake recipe on the table. And maybe that's the way they're going to get the pancakes. So, there are lots of things that you can do. So thank you so much for having me. Happy 2022. Happy Tomorrow World Read Aloud Day. Happy Women's History Month in March. Happy Black History Month in February. Happy taking advantage of books here, there, and everywhere.
Thank you, Susannah. Thank you, Maria. Thank you, Maria. It is a pleasure to have you. Thank you for all of you. And we will be in touch soon. So look forward to hearing from you from our survey. And we will be sending out this recording as well as some other resources related to the event. And I am just about to go and reorganize our library because I think that's long overdue.
Have your kids do it with you, Stacey. Don't do it by yourself.
Oh, for sure. Thank you.
You guys take care.